I am sure that the vast majority of you have heard that the Catholic Church is in the doldrums, that it is too archaic, that it has fallen out of favour, and that Islam is eating away at it all over the world. Well, we cannot say that this is completely false in the case, for example, of Europe, historically the great bastion of this religion. Yes, it is true, Catholicism is still very important in old Europe. I mean, just take a look at this map. As you can see, in countries like Poland and Croatia, more than 80% of their populations consider themselves Catholic. And in countries like Italy, Spain, and France, that percentage exceeds 60%. Of course, the percentage of practicing Catholics is much smaller. For example, in Spain, we are talking about less than 19% of the population. Be that as it may, Europe is no longer the epicenter of world Catholicism. As the world's population has grown, it has gone from housing 66% of the world's entire Catholic population in 1910 to only 25% 100 years later. And this is a trend that is not likely to stop. Look, for example, at this graph. In Spain, one of the most historically Catholic countries in Europe, the trend is very clear. The younger they are, the fewer the believers. This is not only true for Catholics, but for all religious denominations. It's not surprising, therefore, that the Holy See is concerned about the future of Catholicism in Europe and, of course, in the rest of the world. If it runs out of faithful followers, it will no longer have a reason to exist. In business terms, it will have to pull down the shutters and close up shop. Just a side note here, we are VisualPolitik. This is not a video about faith, nor is it about the pros and cons or any religious order. Our objective is to analyze what is happening with one of the major religions in the world, to investigate its future, and to discover what political repercussions all of these changes might have. Having said that, and as a side note, never confuse the Holy See with Vatican City. We've already explained the difference between the two on this channel before, and it could basically be summarized like this.
The expression Holy See refers to the whole constituted by the authority, jurisdiction, and sovereignty vested in the Pope and his successors to lead the Catholic Church throughout the world.
And the Vatican City is basically a state that was created in 1929 to give a territorial identity to the Holy See, which, in addition, has facilitated it to establish relations with other countries and to be present in international organizations such as the UN. And you might be wondering, so who is in charge here? Well, it is true, the Pope is the head of the Holy See, and therefore he is also the head of the Vatican and of the Catholic Church. But do you think he can run the whole thing? Not at all. That is why he relies so much on the civil service of the pontificate, as well as on the famous Roman Curia. And what exactly is it that sounds so elegant? Well, it's basically a collection of congregations, tribunals, pontifical councils, and most importantly of all, the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is crucial for the image and relations of the Holy See around the globe because it is basically in charge of its foreign policy. And at a time when the Catholic Church does not seem to be going through its greatest times, the Pope will need a strong Secretary of State. So what is the Vatican doing to regain the influence of the Holy See in the world? What is the future of Catholicism? What is happening to Vatican diplomacy? Is it possible that Europe is being replaced by another region as the true epicenter of the Catholic Church? VisualPolitik viewers, today we're going to answer all of these questions, but first, let's look at some history.
The mother of all diplomacy.
Which country do you think was the first to weave real diplomatic policy? I am sure many of you are thinking of a European country like England or France, or perhaps even a historic Asian power like China. Well, big mistake. Modern diplomacy did not begin with any state, but rather with the Holy See itself. To give you an idea, it is estimated that it began to maintain diplomatic relations between the 4th and 5th centuries. And not only that, do you know who founded the first diplomatic school in the world? That's right, it was also the Holy See. This was a little time later, to be fair, in 1701. That is, when we are talking about the Holy See, we are not only talking about the church, but also about historical and powerful political apparatus. However, the Holy See and its influence in the world has not always had plain sailing, despite its long and far-reaching experience. Certainly, there have been plenty of forgettable moments. Whether it was the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, or the presence of accredited Apocryphians of the Holy See at the Imperial Court of Byzantium in 453 AD, the diplomacy of the Holy See is considered not only the oldest in the world, but also one of the most powerful and influential. Nevertheless, the power of the popes and the Holy See has suffered several blows. From the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, which gave greater power to the European nation-states and monarchs, to Napoleon Bonaparte's disregard for the powers of the Pope, to the dissolution of the Papal States in 1870. The Catholic Church has come to be truly on the ropes when faced with the advancing power of modern states. In addition, there was also criticism of its inaction at key moments, often limiting itself to condemnatory statements. This was criticized during the First and Second World Wars, and now also during the war in Ukraine. However, the Church has also been highly praised for its role in ending the Cold War, for example, during the papacy of John Paul II. As I was saying though, the path of the Holy See has not always been a bed of roses, but even so, they have managed to establish links with the vast majority of countries in the world. In fact, there are so many countries in which they are nuncios, Vatican diplomats, that it is much easier for us to point to the 12 countries with which it has no established diplomatic relations, either because they are Muslim or communist. And here we have to take into account that the Holy See has one important advantage. Its diplomacy is based, above all, on its aid networks. Whether it is building hospitals, schools, or soup kitchens, the Catholic Church often replaces what is usually the responsibilities of the state, particularly, of course, in poorer countries. And that often translates into a lot of social influence. For example, in the capital of Burkina Faso, we find the St. Vincent May Educational Centre, which provides education for more than 400 young girls without resources. Another example can be found in Turkana, Kenya, where they have built preschools and orphanages, as well as programs to help the sick, the elderly, and the disabled. There are thousands of cases like these all over the world, and this, not surprisingly, has made the Catholic Church gain a lot of sympathy among the most vulnerable, and of course, also among the states that it helps. And not only that, there is also the mediation capacity of the Holy See. For example, John Paul II mediated between Argentina and Chile to avoid an imminent war over the sovereignty of the Beagle Channel Islands. And without going any further, Pope Francis mediated between Obama and Raul Castro to ease tensions between Washington and Havana and to get both governments to release some prisoners held by each other's countries. And then there are the campaigns. The Holy See is involved in many political campaigns on the international level. For example, to claim freedom of worship, to fight against poverty, and now with Pope Francis, they are involved in a fight against climate change, which is a real sign of the times. But there is certainly one message from Pope Francis that has increased his likability exponentially, especially in the developing world. Check this out.
Giù le mani della Repubblica Democratica del Congo, giù le mani dell'Africa, basta soffocare l'Africa. L'Africa non è una miniera da sfruttare o un suolo da saccheggiare. L'Africa sia protagonista del suo destino.
Exactly, VisualPolitik viewers. To all of Pope Francis's statements against consumerism and for the fight against climate change, he now also adds a clearly anti-colonial rhetoric. Check this out.
Dopo quello politico si è scatenato infatti un colonialismo economico, altrettanto schiavizzante. Così questo paese ampiamente depredato non riesce a beneficiare della sufficienza delle sue immense risorse.
Now, what if I told you that these words are no coincidence? That this could be the best asset for the future of the Catholic Church? Surprised? Well, pay very, very close attention.
The new religious hub of Catholicism.
At the beginning of this video, we already said that there is a kind of general feeling that the Catholic Church is not at its best, that it is in the doldrums. And of course, the data shows that this is exactly what is happening in Europe. We've already told you how the old continent has long since ceased to be the region with the largest number of Catholics. But let me ask you a question. Can you tell me which is the region with the largest Catholic population in the world? No, it's not Africa, but Latin America. Some 28% of the 1.36 billion Catholics on planet Earth live in this region. We are therefore talking about 380 million people. And when you think of it, considering its colonial past under the Spanish Empire, that's really not that unusual. But what if I were to tell you that Catholicism has stagnated in Latin America? What if I were to tell you that today the Catholic Church is focusing all of its attention on Africa? And you might be thinking, in Africa? Why is that? Well, very simply, the growth rates of the Catholic population in Africa are much higher than in Latin America, and of course, higher than in Europe. So what is the reason for this growth? Well, on top of what we have already told you earlier, to the social work carried out by the Catholic Church on the continent, both by building the schools we have already mentioned in Burkina Faso and in Kenya, as well as hospitals and aid programs for the most disadvantaged. But pay attention here and take note. To think that this growth is due solely and exclusively to the achievements of the Catholic Church in sub-Saharan Africa would be a tremendous mistake. There is one absolutely decisive factor in the expansion of Catholicism in this region. Do you have any idea what it might be? 3, 2, 1. Exactly. It's population growth. As you can see, since 1960, the population on the African continent has not stopped growing, from a mere 250 million at that time to more than 1.3 billion today. And that trend is not going to change. The fertility rate in Africa exceeds 4 births per woman. That's why the UN is very clear. By 2050, Africa will have more than 2.4 billion inhabitants, which will account for 25% of the world's population. Do you realize what that could mean for the Holy See? Do you realize that this could lead to a huge expansion of Catholicism? Of course, I'm sure that the projections about the increase of the Christian population on the continent thrill Pope Francis. And we are only talking about 5 countries. According to the Pew Research Center, the number of Christians will double in countries like Nigeria and triple in countries like Tanzania. These 5 countries will be among the top 10 countries with the largest Christian populations in the world. And of course, the dominant Christian religion will be Catholicism. In other words, given the increase of the population in Africa and its constant presence there, it is possible that the Catholic Church will become larger than it has ever been. So, is it in the doldrums? Well, maybe not. I don't think so.
L'Africa, sorriso e speranza del mondo, conti di più, se ne parli maggiormente, abbia più peso e rappresentanze tra le nazioni.
Are you surprised? You see, sometimes things are not what they seem. Now, the Holy See seems to have everything in its favor for dominating the religious landscape of the African continent, but do you think it will have no opposition? Well, as you can imagine, nothing could be further from the truth. Check this out.
Muslim opposition and internal demons.
As in any struggle for power or influence, whenever there is an emerging player, there is also competition. And this is exactly the case of the Holy See in Africa, as it faces off against the religion with the largest number of followers in the world: Islam. Fortunately, the Crusades are definitely a thing of the past, so don't expect any all-out war for control of the faithful. However, the Catholic Church is going to have to face an Islam that is deeply rooted in much of the continent, and a religion which also hopes to expand and can count on several advantages. Islam is the most professed religion in the world, and the second most professed religion in all of Africa after Christianity, with nearly 600 million Muslims. And so, as with Catholicism in sub-Saharan Africa, Islam is also making inroads in this region from North Africa, which is overwhelmingly Muslim. In this case, the most practiced branch of Islam on the continent is Sufism. We've already told you on this channel about this branch of Islam before, which focuses on spiritual life and the search for a more mystical relationship with Allah from a much more individual viewpoint. However, the truth is that Sufism has been losing ground during the 21st century to the most radical version of Islam, Salafism, which, if you remember, defends the purity of the religious doctrine and the text of the Quran, the Sunnah, the Jihad, and the great majority of the Hadith, which are the messages attributed to Muhammad and which order many aspects of life. The Salafists reject outright all other religions and all other branches of Islam itself, such as Sufism. Of course, this is a great challenge for the Catholic Church. Not so much for the Sufi side, with which it has a rather theological and argumentative battle to gain more followers, but above all with the Salafist side, a branch of Islam that leaves us news headlines like these.
Nigeria suspects Islamic State of killing 40 in Catholic Church.
I think we can all agree that's pretty horrific. Of course, the problems not only come from the outside. The Catholic Church also has to be wary of a much more orthodox and conservative strand of Catholicism whose roots run deep in Africa. Some of its leading exponents, such as the Ghanaian Cardinal Robert Sarah, have even equated Daesh with anything that might sound like gender ideology. Or Peter Kodwo Apaya Turkson, who went so far as to equate homosexuals with pedophiles. In fact, this openly anti-homosexual position has recently been transferred to politics and legislation in a country with a Catholic majority, Uganda. Of course, these positions clash head-on with the new trends being set by Pope Francis and the Holy See.
Pope Francis says laws criminalizing LGBT people are a sin and an injustice.
As you can see, the Holy See faces both an external opposition that in some cases is very radical and violent, such as that of the Salafists, and also an African Catholic Church that is much more orthodox than that of Rome, which makes it unlikely that we will see, at least for the time being, an African Pope. But what we will undoubtedly see is the growing influence of the African Catholic community in the world. Accompanied by enormous demographic growth, Catholicism continues to grow in that region as in nowhere else in the world. For this reason, although it is losing ground in the secularism of the States and the growing social atheism in Europe, especially among the younger generations, in Africa, the Holy See is finding its new arena. So it is unwise to say that the Catholic Church is in the doldrums. It is simply reorientating itself, and it is quite possible that in a few years, we will see a Catholic Church that is stronger than ever and expanding. But at this point, the questions are over to you. Do you think that Africa will eventually become the center of world Catholicism? Do you see a revival of Catholicism in Europe or a revival in South America? Could the struggle between Catholicism and Islam in Africa have more serious consequences? Will we ever see an African Pope? You can leave me your answer in the comments below. And as always, don't forget that here on VisualPolitik, we release new videos every week. So subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell button down there so you don't miss any of our updates. If you like this video, like it so we know. All the best, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.